Number 10. The Fairy Tale King's Final Plunge. Imagine being a king so obsessed with building fairy tale castles that your own government decides you're less cool Disney visionary and more a financial black hole with a crown. That was King Ludwig II of Bavaria, a man who would rather commission a grotto inspired by a Wagner opera than, govern. His cabinet, tired of seeing the kingdom's budget being spent on what were essentially life-sized, incredibly expensive dioramas, had him declared insane in 1886. They deposed him and placed him under the care of a psychiatrist, Dr. Bernhard von Guden, at a castle overlooking a lake. It was all very neat and tidy. Until, of course, it wasn't. On June 13th, the day after his arrival, Ludwig asked to go for a stroll with Dr. Guden along the shore of Lake Starnberg. The two men left, unescorted, and never came back. Hours later, a search party found their bodies floating in the water. The official story was instantly locked in. The unstable king decided to end it all by walking into the lake, and his heroic doctor drowned trying to save him. Case closed, tragedy averted, long live the new guy. Except the water where they were found was barely knee-deep. Ludwig was a strong swimmer. Dr. von Guden was also a strong swimmer. Furthermore, the doctor's body showed signs of a struggle. He had been bludgeoned and possibly strangled, while Ludwig's own body had no water in his lungs, which is a pretty key ingredient for a drowning. There were reports from local fishermen of hearing gunshots, and rumors that Ludwig's coat had bullet holes in it, a coat that conveniently vanished before the official autopsy. So, you have a king who was a major political and financial inconvenience, a doctor who was his jailer, and two bodies in shallow water with evidence of a violent struggle. It's less of a murder-suicide and more of a murder-murder. Basically, when you become a bigger problem than you're worth, history has a funny way of arranging a tragic and suspiciously shallow swimming accident. Number 9. Death by Cherries. Of all the ways a United States president could go out, you'd expect something grand. A duel, a war, a heroic last stand against a rogue bear. You probably wouldn't expect the official cause of death to be, and I promise I'm not making this up, a bad batch of fruit and some cold milk. This was the fate of Zachary Taylor, the 12th U.S. president and a bona fide war hero who, after just 16 months in office, attended a 4th of July celebration in 1850, chowed down on a large quantity of cherries and iced milk, and promptly came down with a fatal stomach bug. The official diagnosis was cholera morbus, or gastroenteritis, and everyone just sort of shrugged and accepted that the leader of the free world was taken out by a snack that would give a toddler mild indigestion. But let's add a dash of context, shall we? At the time of his death, Taylor was the single biggest obstacle to the expansion of slavery in the United States. He was a Southern slave owner himself, but he was fiercely opposed to letting new territories like California and New Mexico become slave states. He threatened to veto any compromise on the matter, and even promised to personally lead the army to hang any Southern secessionists, with less reluctance than he had hanged deserters and spies in Mexico. His political opponents, primarily powerful pro-slavery Southerners, were furious and desperate. And then, poof. He's gone. His sudden death allowed his much more pliable vice president, Millard Fillmore, to take over and immediately sign the Compromise of 1850, which did exactly what Taylor had fought to prevent. The timing was so perfect, so impossibly convenient, that whispers of arsenic poisoning started immediately. In fact, they were so persistent that his descendants had his body exhumed in 1991 to test for it. While the tests came back negative for a lethal dose, the suspicion alone tells you everything. After all, when your death single-handedly averts a civil war for a decade by giving your enemies everything they want, you have to wonder if someone slipped a little something extra in with the whipped cream. Number 8. The convenient fender bender. Sometimes, the universe has a funny way of solving a political problem. And sometimes, that funny way looks an awful lot like a slow-moving army truck, T-boning the car of the one American general who was about to publicly accuse his own allies of being the next great threat to world peace. Enter General George S. Patton, a man whose personality was somehow louder than his tank divisions. After World War II, Patton wasn't celebrating. He was furious. He believed the Allies had made a catastrophic mistake by letting the Soviet Union get a foothold in Eastern Europe, and was convinced a war with them was inevitable. More importantly, he was planning to go public with it. He was writing letters to Congress, giving explosive interviews, and was on the verge of resigning so he could go on a speaking tour to tell the American people that they just defeated one monster to empower another. He was, in short, a diplomatic nightmare. Then, on December 9, 1945, one day before he was scheduled to fly home. Patton was in a car that collided with a 2.5-ton army truck. The collision was so minor that no one else in either vehicle was seriously injured. It was a classic fender bender. But Patton, sitting alone in the back seat, was thrown forward, breaking his neck and paralyzing him from the neck down. He died from his injuries 12 days later. The official report called it a tragic freak accident, but the freakishness is exactly what makes it so suspicious. The most famously aggressive general of the war, a man who survived countless battles, was taken out by an accident that wouldn't even total a modern minivan. Conspiracy theories bloomed instantly. Was it the American OSS, silencing a loose cannon before he could derail delicate post-war relations? Was it the Soviet NKVD eliminating their most vocal enemy? Eyewitness accounts were conflicting, official reports went missing, and the driver of the truck was whisked away and never thoroughly questioned. It's either the most anticlimactic death in military history, or the most elegantly simple assassination ever staged. A perfect example of your enemies just letting basic physics do their dirty work for them. Number 7. The Secretary General's final descent. Being the Secretary General of the United Nations sounds like a prestigious, if slightly boring, job. You give speeches, you mediate disputes. You politely ask powerful countries to please play nice. But in 1961, Dag Hammarskjöld decided to take the peace part of his job description a little too seriously, and it may have cost him his life. The crisis was in the Congo, which had just gained independence from Belgium and immediately plunged into chaos. The mineral-rich province of Katanga, backed by powerful Western mining interests and Belgian mercenaries, seceded. Hammarskjöld was flying to the region to personally negotiate a ceasefire, a move that directly threatened the immense profits being made by these companies who preferred a divided and exploitable Congo. He was, to put it mildly, a massive thorn in the side of some very rich, very ruthless people. On the night of September 18, 1961, his plane, the Albertina, vanished from the sky as it approached its landing in modern-day Zambia. The next day, the wreckage was found in a forest. Hammarskjöld and 15 others were dead. The official inquiry, led by British colonial authorities who had a vested interest in Katanga, swiftly concluded it was pilot error. The pilot just got too low, they said. A tragic, but explainable accident. Except local eyewitnesses, dozens of them, told a very different story. They reported seeing a second, smaller aircraft shadowing the Albertina. They saw flashes in the sky, and they heard explosions before the crash. The search and rescue operation was also suspiciously delayed for over 15 hours, even though the wreckage was only a few miles from the airport. Most disturbingly, Hammarskjöld was found lying pristine, almost posed, away from the wreckage, with an ace of spades playing card, a notorious symbol of death, reportedly found in his collar. More recent UN investigations have since concluded that it's plausible the plane was brought down by an external attack. It seems when you get in the way of corporate interests and old-world colonialism, you might find that the friendly skies are anything but. Number 6. The 33-day Papacy. If you're going to get rid of a pope, you have to be subtle. You can't exactly stage a fender bender in the Pope-mobile. But in 1978, a problem arose in the Vatican that required a swift, quiet solution. The problem's name was Pope John Paul I. Known as the Smiling Pope, he had been in the job for barely a month, but he was already proving to be a revolutionary. Specifically, he was horrified by the rampant corruption he found in the Vatican Bank, which was operating less like a holy institution and more like a money-laundering service for the mafia, shady political groups, and a financier nicknamed God's Banker, John Paul. I was not smiling about this. He drew up a list of over 100 Freemasons within the Vatican and was planning a complete purge, starting with the American Archbishop running the bank. He was set to announce these sweeping changes the very next day. And then, he was just dead. After only 33 days in office, he was found in his bed, supposedly from a heart attack. The Vatican insisted it was natural causes, the sad result of a frail man taking on a stressful job. But the details are less than divine. The Vatican's story of who found the body and when changed multiple times. Crucially, they broke Italian law by refusing to perform an autopsy, a standard procedure for any unattended death. His personal effects, his glasses, his slippers, and most importantly, the documents he was reviewing that night, which allegedly contained the details of his planned purge, all vanished. The man who had been a healthy, active 65-year-old just a month prior was suddenly gone, and his death conveniently stopped the biggest financial and political cleanup in modern Vatican history right in its tracks. All the people he planned to fire remained in power, It's a chilling reminder that while a pope might have a direct line to God, his enemies on earth might have a more direct line to his bedroom. Number 5. The Kingfish's Last Stand. In the 1930s, one man was a bigger threat to Franklin D. Roosevelt's presidency than the entire Republican Party combined. Huey Long. As the populist governor and later senator from Louisiana, the Kingfish was a charismatic, authoritarian demagogue who commanded absolute power in his home state and had his eyes set on the White House. He was planning to run for president in 1936 with his Share Our Wealth program, a plan so popular it threatened to split the Democratic vote and hand the election to the Republicans. To the political establishment, Long wasn't just a rival. He was a wrecking ball aimed at the very heart of American politics. On September 8, 1935, that threat was permanently neutralized. The official story is that Long was in the Louisiana State Capitol building when he was confronted by Dr. Carl Weiss, the son-in-law of a political opponent. Weiss allegedly stepped out from behind a pillar, shot Long in the abdomen with a small handgun, and was then immediately gunned down by Long's bodyguards in a heroic defense of their boss. Weiss's body was riddled with over 60 bullets. Long died 2 days later from his wound, a straightforward assassination by a lone gunman with a personal grudge. But the chaos of that moment hides a much darker and more convenient possibility. For starters, many ballistics experts have questioned whether the small .32 caliber pistol Weiss was carrying could have created the specific wound that killed Long. But here's the real kicker: the bodyguards. In their frantic, panicked response, they unleashed a storm of lead inside a building made of marble and stone, a perfect ricochet gallery. The most prominent theory, supported by some eyewitnesses and even Long's own dying words, is that Weiss never fired a shot. He may have only punched Long, and in the ensuing mayhem, one of the bodyguard's own high-caliber bullets bounced off a wall and hit the senator. In this version, Long wasn't killed by an assassin, but by the panicked incompetence of his own men. It's a conspiracy of chaos, an assassination where the assassins get to be the heroes. And for FDR and the establishment, it was the perfect solution. A dangerous rival eliminated, with no one to blame but a dead doctor and the tragic fog of war. Number 4. The Blonde Bombshell's Final Call. On August 5, 1962, the world lost its most incandescent star. Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her Brentwood home. The official cause ruled a probable suicide from a massive overdose of barbiturates. It was a story that wrote itself. The beautiful, fragile actress, crushed by the pressures of fame, finally succumbing to her demons. A tragic end to a Hollywood fable. But what if the fable was a cover story for a political thriller? What if her death wasn't about the pressures of Hollywood, but the secrets of Washington, D.C.? Let's zoom out from the tragic bedroom scene and look at Monroe's phone records, or rather, the fact they conveniently went missing. In her final months, Monroe was deeply entangled with the two most powerful men in the country, President John F. Kennedy and his brother, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. The affairs were an open secret, but the real danger wasn't the romance. It was the pillow talk. Monroe allegedly kept a little red diary filled with sensitive political secrets she had learned from the brothers, from Cold War maneuverings to mafia connections. She was becoming emotionally unstable and had started threatening to hold a press conference to expose everything. She was no longer a glamorous dalliance. She was a national security threat in a Chanel suit. On the day she died, Robert Kennedy was allegedly in Los Angeles and had a fierce argument with her. Her housekeeper gave conflicting, bizarre accounts of the night, and the first ambulance driver to arrive claimed she was still alive, in a coma, before being mysteriously sent away. A suicide is tragic, but a carefully staged suicide. For a woman who was about to bring down the Kennedy administration, that's not a tragedy, that's a cleanup operation. It turns out the most dangerous thing in the world isn't being the enemy of a powerful man, but his secret. Number 3. The Mountain King's Mysterious Fall. King Albert III of Belgium was not your typical monarch. He was a certified hero, leading his country's army during World War I and earning the nickname the Night King for his bravery on the front lines. After the war, he was beloved by his people and respected across Europe. His one personal passion was mountaineering, a dangerous hobby he pursued with expert skill. So when he was found dead at the bottom of a cliff in 1934, the official verdict was swift and simple. A tragic, but not entirely surprising climbing accident. The hero king died as he lived, pushing the limits. But the story of a simple slip of the foot starts to crumble under the slightest pressure. For one, Albert was an exceptionally skilled and cautious climber, and the route he was on was one he knew well and was considered relatively easy. He was climbing alone, which was unusual for him on anything but the simplest of ascents. No one in the area heard a cry for help or the sound of a fall. The location of his body was also odd. Found neatly positioned at the base of the cliff, not mangled and broken in the way one would expect after a 60-foot fall onto rock. Then there's the political climate. In the 1930s, Europe was a powder keg. One credible theory suggests Albert was assassinated by French intelligence. He had staunchly refused to allow France to use Belgian forts for a preemptive strike against Hitler's Germany, making him a major obstacle to their military plans. Others whisper of a domestic political or financial scandal he was about to expose. Decades later, a forensic analysis of blood-stained leaves found near his body revealed they were not his, suggesting someone else was there. A solo climbing accident is the perfect murder. There's no weapon, no witnesses, and the cause of death is provided by nothing more than gravity. It's a quiet, elegant way to make sure a king who stands in your way takes one final, fatal tumble. Number 2. The whistleblower's last drive. Sometimes it's not kings or generals who become a problem, but ordinary people who refuse to look the other way. Karen Silkwood was a chemical technician at the Kerr-McGee plutonium plant in Oklahoma, and in 1974, she discovered something terrifying. The company was cutting corners on safety, falsifying records, and exposing its workers to dangerous levels of radiation. After becoming contaminated herself, she decided to go public. She gathered a binder full of evidence, photos, documents, and damning internal memos, and arranged to meet with a reporter from the New York Times. She was a walking, talking PR and legal disaster for a multi-million-dollar corporation. On the night of November 13th, she got in her Honda Civic to drive to that meeting. She never made it. State troopers found her car in a ditch, smashed into a concrete culvert. Karen was dead. The official investigation concluded she had simply fallen asleep at the wheel. After all, an autopsy found sedatives in her system. Case closed. A tired worker. A tragic accident. But let's look at the details the official report glossed over. The binder full of evidence she was carrying. It was gone. Vanished from the scene. Never to be recovered. Friends and family insisted she was wide awake and energized for the meeting. And while she did have a prescription for the sedatives, they said she never would have taken one before such a critical drive. Most chillingly, an independent crash expert found fresh dents on her rear bumper, consistent with her car being forced off the road from behind. The story shifts from a sleepy driver to a woman with a target on her back, hunted down on a dark highway. It's one thing to be a political inconvenience. It's another thing entirely to be a financial one. When you have proof that could cost a powerful corporation billions, you might find that the most dangerous thing on the road isn't a sharp curve, but the car in your rearview mirror. Number 1. The People's Princess and the Parisian Tunnel. Finally, we arrive at the mother of all modern conspiracies. On August 31st, 1997, the world awoke to the unthinkable news. Diana, Princess of Wales, was dead. The story is seared into our collective memory. Hounded by paparazzi on motorcycles, her Mercedes, driven by security chief Henri Paul, sped into the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris, lost control, and slammed into a concrete pillar. The official narrative was immediate and damning, a tragic but inevitable consequence of media obsession and a drunk driver. Henri Paul's blood alcohol level was found to be 3 times the legal limit. A terrible accident, but an accident nonetheless. But for a simple accident, the details are anything but. Diana was no longer just Prince Charles's ex-wife. She was a global icon, a humanitarian powerhouse campaigning against landmines, ticking off the international arms industry, and was seriously involved with Dodi Fayed, an Egyptian Muslim. To the British establishment, the thought of the mother of the future King of England marrying a Muslim was allegedly anathema. She had become a rogue agent, too popular and too unpredictable to control. Then came the crash. The CCTV cameras inside the tunnel, all 10 of them, were mysteriously not working that night. The ambulance took a shocking 1 hour and 40 minutes to transport Diana to a hospital, taking a bizarrely long route and stopping within sight of the hospital for a full 10 minutes. There were persistent reports of a white Fiat Uno that clipped the Mercedes in the tunnel and sped away, a vehicle that was never officially found. Henri Paul's blood samples were questioned, with claims they were mishandled or didn't even belong to him. Her own bodyguard, the only survivor, was left with severe amnesia. It's the perfect storm of suspicious circumstances, all of which served to eliminate the most beloved and perhaps most dangerous woman in the world. It may have been a car crash, but for those who believe the official story is a fairy tale, it was an assassination by 1,000 convenient coincidences. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future, Subscribe to see them.